Right, guys. So, how can we expect the format to change as a result of the ban list? So, to start off with branded, branded has always been pretty good. I think it was getting overshadowed by a lot of the newer decks, but at YCS Bologna, we did see a lot of people playing branded. We did see a lot of people doing well. If I'm not mistaken, one made it all the way up to top four. Is it top 16? It's either top 16 or top four or something, but they made it quite far. I think branded gets a bit better, just as a deck that pretty much escaped any sort of retribution at all on the ban list. Next up, we have that fake, I don't know, branded whatever deck. That's fake, so that doesn't count. Chimera is a deck that we saw fall out of favor pretty heavily. I don't think there was many Chimera players at all. Most people, actually, or most successful people, were playing pure branded as opposed to Chimera branded. Having said that, I think it's a similar thing to before, where it's just a case of what kind of branded you want to play. I do think regular branded is a bit better with that gimmick lock, but Chimera branded does have its advantages, so it's a little bit worse than regular branded in my opinion, but still worth putting up there. Dark World, unfortunately, yeah, it's going to be somewhere in Rogue or below that. It's just not amazing, this format. Dragons, so I'd say Dragons is a pretty happy this ban list. They didn't lose anything, and they do get access to a couple of new interesting tools. Potentially, there's some people are thinking about using cards like Ib and Dragons, which isn't too bad of a card. Just before Ib was banned, people were looking into slotting Ib into Dragons, and so now that we do have it back, there's a chance that card does accelerate some of their combos. They've got Redox, Dragon Ruler Borders. I don't think it matters. I don't think they're going to play any of the Dragon Rulers in actual Dragon Link, but all in all, I would say that Dragon Link is a little bit stronger than it was before, and then also the other decks that were top decks have kind of been slapped down a little bit. Drytron, also somewhere in Rogue. Exosister, somewhere in Rogue. Flunderies is another good winner on the ban list. Yet another ban list where it didn't get slapped down for the Featherstorm. Prosperity didn't get hit. I mean, Shifter didn't get hit. This deck is doing pretty well. So in terms of power level, it does creep up a little bit while other decks go down. I would say the thing is, though, Flunder always is going to have its issues where either you brick or you destroy your opponent. There's not much in between with this deck. Heroes is somewhere in Rogue. Everything that's in Rogue and non I don't care that much. Don't worry about the order. Just know that I don't think it's that good. So Infernables, probably one of the biggest sufferers on this ban list. I'd say Infernables goes down to low tier 2, maybe even Rogue. The Isolde hit is huge, to be honest. And I think the Isolde hit removes most of the unfair aspects of Infernable. Now, I do think this deck is still playable. They have combo lands without Isolde. They can play through their synchro mainly instead, and it does, I guess, free up the extra deck a little bit and declutter your main deck a little bit. But all in all, I mean, it's the same as like Pendulum's losing Hulk. For the most part, this deck is a lot worse than it was before. There's just not much reason to play it. So yeah, somewhere in Rogue, maybe very, very low tier 2 at most, but it's not going to be amazing. Kashtira is a happy camper after this ban list because, yeah, it gets access to another unicorn, which is great. I mean, the thing is, when you have a deck like Kashtira that has so few starters, getting just one extra starter actually does matter. It's gone from 5 to 6 starters. So it got a pretty sizable increase in the amount. It's a 20% increase in consistency almost. So it is quite nice for Kashtira to get another unicorn, and I do think that as an anti-meta annoying strategy, it does a job. So somewhere up here, I'd say in 1.5, it's still a pretty good deck. Labyrinth is probably the most happy deck on this list. The hits to the floodgates basically made no difference. The only floodgate that Labyrinth really, really likes is Skill Drain. Every other floodgate it can play, but it's not that deep. And so Labyrinth is absolutely happy. It does very, very well in this format. And I do think until Phantom Nightmare, this is going to be the best deck. I don't think there's going to be any deck that can really dominate Labyrinth. It just escaped unscathed, which is nice, whereas the other top decks got slapped down quite a lot. Vanadium, somewhere to 1.5 low tier 2. I think this deck is still doing pretty good. It didn't lose anything on the ban list. It's still not performing very well though. Other than Triff, no one's really playing this deck. But yeah, thereabouts where it is. Marincis didn't perform this YCS, but always does perform. So tier 1.5 or tier 2, it's really arguable where you put it. Circular, guys, I'm really upset at Konami. This card did not need to be hit. I really don't think it needed to be. It was really unfair, and with Circular being banned, I think Mathmech goes all the way back to the depths of non-meta where they were before. Like, people might argue before that Mathmech were a rogue before, but I don't even think they were rogue. I think they were non-meta before, and I think that's where they're going straight back to without circular. It's just a shame. Yes, you can play firewall defense and stuff instead, but it's just not the same. These cards don't do the same thing as circular. I think the biggest thing about circular, specifically for MathMech, is the ability to search, to essentially search Super Factorial and make it live with one card. They could do all of that, and then on the crack pack, they could kill you with one card. They don't have that anymore, which is a huge, huge problem for the deck. Yeah, guys, the Mathmech days are fully over. It is really sad that Mathmech got punished that badly, but I might make a circular tier, especially for Mathmech. To be fair, actually, yeah, let's do that. Let's make a circular tier. And it's just for Mathmech alone to suffer in that deal. Next up, Pearly. Pearly got a little bit of a love tap. However, the hit to Pearly, the interesting thing about Pearly is a card going from 3 to 2 in Pearly is a lot more detrimental than in Pearly than in any other deck, simply because in Pearly, if a card goes from 3 to 3, you no longer get the guaranteed search of my friend, which does hugely destroy the consistency, along with having a lower chance of drawing it. So Pearly is weaker, and I would say that the other kind of unfortunate thing about Pearly being weaker in that respect is that they also lose their kind of capped draw six. Now that wasn't happening all the time, but it did happen often enough. But they also don't have that now, so yeah, a bit of a shame for Pearly. It's a little bit weaker. Resgrace has gotten a bit weaker. Now you can replace the extra airlifters with witches. They can play more hand traps. The deck is still good. I still think it's probably one of the best decks in the format. However, it does get a lot worse. I think the two places where Rescue Ace really struggles from the lifter hit. The first one is that not having the lifter on turn one, or the extra lifters, mean that your hydrant line is more easily stopped. A lot of the times they summon hydrant and then it's like you stop it, but then they normal summon airlift anyway. Now they can't do that. Now it's like if you stop that hydrant line, they a lot of the times are just going to have to pass because it's hard to get those two cards in the grave. The second place where it's really punishing for Rescue Ace, I would say, is on the crackback. On the crackback with Rescue Ace, well, it's not even just on the crackback, it's on the opponent's turn / the crackback. A lot of times you want to summon Airlifter again so that you can get access to HQ or you can get access to Alert for your crackback combos. Now, though, you can only really access the second airlifter from the grave, which means that your hydrant has to search preventer. Your hydrant search basically has to resolve on the crackback. If it doesn't resolve, you actually destroy the rescue grind a lot, because a lot of the times they're going to have used the rescue already. They're going to have used their alert already to have comboed. So you have to change the way you play Rescue Ace a bit. It definitely doesn't kill the deck. The deck is still good, but it is a big problem for the deck. It is going to make it weaker than it was before. It is going to make the deck, I would say, probably about 15 to 20% less consistent, which is a lot, but still better than a lot of decks in the format. However, when Phantom Nightmare comes out, I do think Rescue is going to go back to tier 1. Next up, Rika. Rika's another deck that has been punished hard, so again, I don't play Rika much, so I can't say for sure, but for now, I would say Rika does go somewhere into High Rogue, losing the... So apparently, there are other combos, but it's the old combos, which have... A lot of them have weaknesses, like they can't play around Neb and things like that. Also have a lot less recursion. It is a bit of a problem for this deck losing that extra healer. Now, the interesting thing though is that Aram Mage cards are coming out, and so when those Aram Mage cards come out, I don't know exactly when they are. Might be in a few months, might be longer. Rika might bump back up because it does fundamentally have a lot of things that make it good into a lot of decks in the format. It does have a lot of long complex combo lines that people don't bother learning, and so they get punished by them. But we just have to wait and see what happens with Rika. For now, I would say it's probably going to be somewhere in Rogue. It does lose a lot of strength, unfortunately. Runic gets better, I think, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Runic, so this is, I'm showing Life Twin cards because I didn't bother changing anything. This is not Runic Life Twin. This is actually going to be Runic Bastille that I'm referring to here. And I would say that Runic as a deck gets a lot better in terms of two things. Firstly, Joshua Schmidt essentially showed people a new way to play the deck in an effective way. I don't know if it was his build exactly, but the point is that him winning has shown people, okay, this is how you can play the deck and this is how you can perform well with the deck. And it does have a good matchup into a lot of things, this format, with the ability to dodge cards and just a very strong resource game. The second reason why Runic is better is obviously the list as well. Both Unchained and Rescue Ace being slapped down is good for Runic because it did struggle going second into bigger boards. And so it's a nice situation for Runic. I still don't think it's amazing. I still don't think it's very dominant. But I actually do think it's a good deck, this format. I think it's playable. Like, it's tier 1.5, which is quite wide at the moment. Sprite got stronger. I think Sprite is very, very good. It was already good before, and it just got another start, and the other decks got weaker, so Sprite is definitely going to be doing great. Centurion and Fire Kings are both doing very well in the format. These decks are both topping relatively consistent, which is nice. Centurion, it makes sense. It's got an FTK win condition on top of having a lot of one card starters. It does have some weaknesses, but they can be shored up with cards like Horus cards. So yeah, definitely a good deck. Fire Kings as well, doing pretty good. I think the thing about Fire Kings is when Phantom Nightmare comes out, that is going to jump up to tier 1. But for now, I'd say it's a little bit weaker than Centurion. We did see a lot of them top at YCS Bologna, but I'm inclined to believe that's more because people didn't know what to do against it than the deck being incredibly dominant. I think it's going to have its dominant time, it's just not started yet. Synchron is, I don't know. I don't know where Synchron is. I don't care. No one's playing this deck, so it doesn't matter. I'm actually going to put in Rogue because no one's playing it. Tier Elements unfortunately got a lot worse. Now the thing about Tier Elements is it's going to become a deck like Dragon Link where people have to resolve it every format. So I think Tier is probably still good. The cards are still fundamentally good, and they still have access to kind of things like Femray and stuff to get into their combo. They just don't have the OP shufflers anymore. But I do think Tier will see a resurgence and probably pop back up. It's probably after Unchained, it sees the biggest drop out of any other deck because it really does lose a lot by losing those mill 5s, or I'm saying shufflers or millers, whatever. By losing Kelbeck and Agido, it does hurt the deck a lot, but I do think there are other ways to play the deck. I do think the Horus engine is good for the deck. So Tier is not dead. I definitely don't think it's dead. I think it's good. Unchained. So when Unchained got hit first, I actually thought that it wasn't that deep. But then when I looked deeper into Unchained and I tried to play with it, I realized that the hit is actually huge to Unchained. And it really comes down to the fact that the biggest problem Unchained has always had is its ability to start its plays. Shalvara did a lot for the deck because it essentially meant that if you ever have an Unchained body on board, if you ever have a trap in hand, it can combo. Now, that's not always the case. You're very unlikely because you've only got 4 copies of that. So you've gone down from 7 to 4 copies of that card, which is big. But then not only that, but it also means things like on the crackback, you don't have this card. It means later in your combo, you can't research this card. I mean, now your opponent's DD Crows and stuff from this card is also punishing. So Unchained, I think it goes down a lot, somewhere to mid tier 2. It's still a good deck. Before the support, it was a good deck, and I think after the support as well, it's still going to be a good deck. But it's nowhere near as strong as it was before. You are going to lose harder to cards like Nib. You're going to lose harder to cards like Imperm, Veiler, Ash on your initial normal summon of Tour Guide or whatever. It's a bit of a shame. We'll see if people still play this, but there's a chance people just end up dropping this deck and then it just kind of goes further and further down because people aren't really exploring and trying to crack this deck open. Next up, we have Vanquish Soul. Doesn't really change. I don't know, it was somewhere in tier 2. I can't remember where I put Vanquish Soul. I don't think Vanquish Soul's that good of a deck, but I think it's like Flunder, but weaker, basically. It abuses Floodgates and things like that. Virtual did nothing. I thought it might have a chance. It did nothing. Orcus. So Orcus is really, really interesting. I think that Orcus has huge potential. And the thing is, Harp Horror is actually a really, really good card. And there are a lot of different ways to abuse in the format. I think between the Diabell Star engine and the Horus engine, and even Ib coming out, there's just so many different options of splashing little Orcus packages into deck. I think probably the 2 best are going to be Firelink when it comes out. And I will have a little bit of a guide on that deck when it comes out in Phantom Nightmare. And Horus. I think those 2 engines are going to be absolutely crazy with a little Orcus package in them. And so I do think Orcus for now is going to be somewhere like mid to bottom of tier 2, but it has a chance of creeping up. I think Sky Strike Orcus is another good variant that we might see. But yeah, I do think the deck has potential. I do think it needs to be solved a bit, but yeah, it's going to do well. And Mekanko. Mekanko is another big victim on the ban list. So this is the thing. Mekanko is still a good deck. Unfortunately, the thing that happens to Mekanko is losing Isolde really denies your ability as Mekanko to play off just basically any generic set of warriors. You can't do things like Gosek make an SP and then do your plays anymore. And that's what's really hard for Mekanko. Now, it is still a good deck. It does still have fundamentally broken cards. Arabesque and Ohime are probably 2 of the strongest cards created this year. Like, they are very, very good cards. But it's not enough. Isolde was kind of the thing that pushes it over the edge. And so I do think Mekanko went from being kind of a high tier 1.5 deck to again being somewhere in tier 2. Like, it's not amazing, and I don't expect to see many people topping with Mekanko anymore. Prove me wrong, because I actually love Mekanko. I think it's a cool deck, but this is where the format is at the moment, in my opinion. Now, guys, keep in mind, I don't think this is going to last. I think this is a month format at longest. I think the format will shake up again once Phantom Nightmare comes out, but yeah, we're in an okay spot. Labyrinth Supremacy, so make sure you have your back row removal in the main deck. But yeah, guys, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.